Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to 5 Ways to Incorporate Ancestor Work in Your Practice. As Samhain, aka Halloween, was last night, the veil is still thin. It doesn't like shut off at like midnight on November 1st. I thought that this would be a good topic for this week. Let me just move this. In our last live stream, I had some issues. I couldn't see anybody's comments. So if I'm not responding to your comment, I'm not being a jerk. I can't see it, but because for some reason it's not working very well. All right. So since we have new people in the group, I just want to introduce myself. I am Ivy. I created this group, Rising Fire Tribe. I am a spiritual life coach, a high priestess, a teacher, and a reader. I do readings as well. So that's who I am. I have led a coven for about 15 years, and in that I also teach our students and help create these rituals. And some of this information I'm going to share with you today I've actually done every one of these things in my own personal practice, so I'm just excited to share them with you. So let's get started. Hi, Amanda. Yay. Okay, let's get started by talking about what ancestors are. So when you think about ancestors, we usually think about our family ancestors, like our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, however far back you want to go. Or if you are, it doesn't have to be a blood ancestor, it can be like an adopted ancestor if you are adopted. We've got those like familial ancestors, and we've got territorial or land ancestors. And these are the ancestors of the land on which you live now. Those who were stewards of the land before you came into the picture and began living on the land that you are on right now. There are also ancestors of the heart, which are those who have passed that you might have considered family, like close friends, spiritual sisters, or spiritual brothers. And then we have spiritual ancestors, which are those who have helped you along your path that have passed beyond the veil. So maybe it could be an author, it could be a teacher, anybody that has contributed to your path. So those are 4 different groups of ancestors that you can begin to incorporate into your practice. Because I know, especially if you're young, I remember when I was young, my first Samhain, I still had all of my people that I knew. Sorry, drinking water. All right, so I didn't know who to honor. Like my dog, which you could totally honor your animals, please. But like that was who I had a picture of my dog on our coven ancestor altar. And of course, as you get older, unfortunately, the more people you have to honor. So, but if you don't have anybody that's passed and you still want to work on your ancestors, you can do that. You have more ancestors than just the ones that are like your bloodline. Okay, so most cultures through time have honored their ancestors in one way or another, and one way that we see that now is the Day of the Dead celebrations that are all over. Hi, Christy. That are all over the place now, and it's amazing. And I live in Southern California, where we have a lot of Mexican culture and Mexican influence in this area in particular. So I can buy marigolds. Hi, Karen. So I can buy marigolds at the grocery store, and I can source out sugar skulls if I wanted to. It's not my holiday, so I don't celebrate it. But those sorts of ancestor honoring traditions are alive and well in our culture today. And sometimes you can find them at your local grocery store. I've always wondered if it was appropriate to honor non-blood as ancestors. I would say yes. I mean, you're not like claiming them like you are my blood ancestor, but if I passed away and if any of you wanted to honor me, I would feel like super special, like on the other side of the veil. So I don't believe that it has to be a blood ancestor. I mean, like I said, I've honored my animals before, and I was not descended, I did not descend from them. So, All right, so in any way, it's nice to honor those that have gone before you. I mean, if when I pass away, I'm hoping that people will remember me, and if they feel so called, to honor me at Samhain, like, you know, if I have children, etc. Okay, so let's start. I'm gonna get more water. Sorry. All right. Number one, first way is an ancestor shrine. Ancestor shrine. Hi, Miriam. We usually see this most often at Samhain or Day of the Dead. And it's basically a physical place where you can honor your ancestors. So you might want to add photos of the people that have passed on, maybe food that your ancestors enjoyed, symbols that remind you of them, or possessions or trinkets that you have that once belonged to them. You could also add symbols of the beyond. So like whatever represents the underworld or the other world or the beyond the veil, whatever, or heaven or whatever you believe. Symbols of that you can also put on your ancestor altar. Excuse me. And you can also do offerings to psychopomps. Now, if you don't know what a psychopomp is a psychopomp is a spirit, usually a god or a god or some sort of spirit that helps take the souls when somebody has passed over to the other side of the veil. So that's what a psychopomp is. So you can also, like, for example, in my coven's latest ritual last weekend, we honored Hermes, who is a psychopomp. Okay? So it's just, and you can do offerings. You can do offerings to your ancestors. You have an ancestor altar that stays up all year round. Awesome. And a pet altar. Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of people do. If I had the space, I definitely would. You know, it's kind of a bummer to pack up all my ancestor stuff after Samhain and put it away. Like, I would love to have like a beautiful space where I could put everybody's picture up and do offerings. And you know what you can do offerings of food and drink. If they liked a specific type of whiskey, you would get that and do that as an offering, or you can just offer water, a glass of water. So those are just some ideas of what you can do. All right, number one was an ancestor shrine or ancestor altar. Number two is hosting a dumb supper. If you've never done this before, it is a really, really cool experience. And it's pretty easy to do. Sorry if you can hear that. That's my cat. She wants in very badly. Number one, the first thing you would need to do, oh, that's awesome, Christy. Yours sits right on top of the entertainment center. So that's a great place for it. All right. If you want to host a dumb supper, it's a lot more fun if you have multiple people. So if you have any like-minded friends that want to attend a dumb supper, Hermes, what kind of offerings? Different offerings for different ones? Yes. If you're going to do offerings to psychopomps, my suggestion would be research that psychopomp and find out how he was honored or how she was honored in like their time. So for example, for Hermes, I actually did the evocation for Hermes, and I offered him styrax, and frankincense as my offering to him. So that's what I would do. I would just do different. If you're doing psychopomps, research who you're honoring and find out what they like. Or if you're doing offerings to your different ancestors, yeah, you could do different types of offerings to different ones. Okay, dumb supper. Let's go on to dumb supper. First thing you want to do is put together your guest list. Find out how many people you want to invite. I would keep it pretty small. Or I think like maybe like 4 to 6 people, like definitely no more than 8. And I'll explain why in a second. What we have found helps is a printed program. So basically a dumb supper is a silent supper where you invite your ancestors to dine with you and to give you any messages that that they might have to give to you. So it's completely silent. So it's really good if you know these people that are coming to your dumb supper, so that you might understand, like, your vibe is going to be in the same way. So if you need to communicate with somebody, you'll be on the same vibe. If not, it's fine. You can do a printed program, and that helps everything run smoothly. Just all of the steps that I'm going to go over. About 12 hours for your dumb supper? Wow, that's awesome. That's great. How fun. I want to hear more about that. So the first thing, this is just kind of like your traditional dumb supper. Like, obviously, if you have like a lot of people, like if you have 12 people like Christy did, you might want to change the setup and the flow of events a little bit more. So printed program. So print your program, put one at everybody's plate, and that would be really helpful. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create a sacred space. Everything on the dining table should be black if at all possible. You should have one chair at the head of your table, like draped in black or draped in white. I like to drape it in black. And it really depends on what colors you personally attribute to death, because many cultures attribute white to death and many attribute black. So whatever your color is, drape. That's a spirit chair, and that's like the chair where we're going to assume the ancestors come, okay? And then you obviously have a seat for everybody attending. So before supper time, each person writes messages to their ancestors, just like on a little piece of paper, just write some messages. You could write it all in one message, or you could write one message to each ancestor that you want to honor during the dumb supper and invite. The next step, so everybody, if you can picture a table beautifully set, you've got a chair enough chairs for everybody, you've got your spirit chair, you've got your printed program, and everybody has these little pieces of paper that they have written on. Still prior to supper, everybody takes an equal amount of tea lights as the amount of people that they want to honor and place them around the plate of the spirit chair. So if I'm writing 3 messages, I'm writing messages to 3 ancestors, I would put 3 tea lights. Okay, so that is the setup of a dumb supper. Now, when supper begins, if you do a procession, you could do a procession, and once everybody passes the doorway, whatever doorway you're using as the veil, everybody becomes silent. Each guest spends a moment at the spirit chair with a silent prayer. Evidently, my spirit chair is over here, with a silent prayer to the ancestors. Everybody, and then the guests are seated. Everybody joins hands for a silent blessing. And then once that is done, the hostess takes a plate for the ancestors, because the spirits get served first, and creates a plate for the ancestors, and then she serves the rest of the people at the table. Okay, and everybody waits to eat until everybody is, has their food. Now, if you have 12 people like Christy, you might want to switch that up, because to make 12 plates is going to be a while. So you might serve the spirit chair first and then do buffet style. You can switch it up to whatever you need to do. Okay? All right. So after everybody is served, everybody gets to start eating. And then after you're done eating, each guest signals that they're done. And the way that we do it is we cross our silverware and put it on our plate, and that means we're done with the eating part. And while you're eating, just be aware of any messages that might come to you, and just be open and receptive, because and you may even want to journal after this, because if you get a lot of messages or a lot of things, and it doesn't even have to be a message. Sometimes it's feelings. Sometimes you can smell things. Sometimes you can hear things. It's not like there's going to be, there could be like a word that comes into your head, but there might not be. You've got 5 senses, right? You might feel something in your body. That could be a message too. So keep that in mind. So everybody's done eating. Everybody has crossed their silverware. And now each guest in turn approaches the spirit chair, right? They light the candles that they've placed near the plate. So you've got, for example, I've got my 3 tea lights. So I light my 3 tea lights. And then I take my messages and I light it on the candle, and then I place it in a burn bowl to burn. And it's thought that the smoke carries your message to the ancestors. Okay. After everybody's done that, everybody again approaches the spirit chair for Can you write any messages during? Oh, that's good. Okay, so Chrissy says we had a server and each plate served the ancestor plate got a spoonful of the food and it was full until it was full. Cool. Miriam, can you write any messages during or does it have to be after? I would write all messages received from the ancestors, I mean. You could, however, I would suggest to wait until you're done because if you've got a bunch of people eating and you're journaling, if you're projecting what's in your mind onto paper, you're not being completely receptive. And it's really good to take that time to be as receptive as possible because, you know, this happens probably once a year for most people. That's what I would do. I would wait until after and journal or share with your dinner mates. Okay? All right. So messages have been burned. Everybody is approached the spirit chair for the final prayer. Everybody joins hands for a final blessing, a final silent blessing, and then the end. And then if you did a processional in, you'll probably want to do a processional out. And once you're out of the room or out of the space, then you can speak again. That was, maybe I just should have been like, I'll explain the dumb supper in this live stream. All right. So let's see. So number 3 is offerings. We just talked about them in regarding like your ancestor shrine. When you do an offering, get clear about your intention, right? So you're not distracted. Get really clear about what your intention is. Choose your offering carefully. And it doesn't even have to be a physical offering. Physical offerings tend to be pretty easy to come by, especially you can offer, like I said, a glass of water. But you can also dedicate future actions or dedicate actions in your ancestor's name. So if you have an ancestor who was a farmer and you were going to go help work a farm, because they have farm vacations where you can like go learn how to work a farm for two weeks. You could do that as an offering to your farmer ancestor. So it doesn't have to be a physical offering. It can be all kinds of different things. If you do have a physical offering, and this is a question that a lot of people have. This is a question I had and really struggled with when I first started out. I have made my offering. It is on my altar. Now what do I do? Like, now what do I do with it? How long do I leave it there, right? Like, what do I do with it afterwards? Like, do I just leave this cake on my altar until it is nothing but mush and ants come after it? You know? So when you're done with your offering and how long you leave it on your altar depends really on what your offering is. If it's something that's going to mold and decay, I probably wouldn't leave it there for a long time. If you have like whiskey or water, like you can change that out or you know, release that. You can probably leave that on for a longer amount of time. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so when you're done with it, what you would want to do with your offering remnants is offer it return and release it to the 4 elements. So that could mean releasing it in a body of water, like in a running stream or a creek, but you want to make sure that that offering isn't like chemical, it's not going to harm the ecosystem, etc. You can bury it in the earth or bury it in the earth, dig a hole, bury that offering, remnants of that. If it's something that you burn, you can release the ashes into the air and or you can burn it, like you can just burn your offering, that's fire. So those are the 4 elements and those are great ways to release the remnants of your offerings. All right. So number 4, let's talk about writing a letter to your ancestors. And writing messages at the dumb supper is different from writing like a whole letter to your ancestors. When you're writing a letter to your ancestors, you have a specific focus. So it could be one ancestor in particular, like my grandmother passed away, I miss her a lot, I want to write a letter to her. It could be a group of ancestors, to those ancestors who XYZ, who were farmers, to those ancestors who were hurt by domestic violence. You know, like you can write a letter to a group of your ancestors, and it can be your unknown ancestors. You don't need to know the names of every single one of your ancestors. I mean, you're just not going to. No matter how much like Ancestry.com wants you to think that you can. You can only go back so far because record keeping only went back so far. But if you think about it, our ancestors are not just like our grandmother. You know, they're our 10th great grandmother, and they're like you know, back to where civilization began. We have so many more ancestors than we can even like grasp, right? So you can write a letter to your unknown ancestors. You can write, like, let's say I wanted to write a letter to my ancestors that worship the goddess, because I'm pretty sure there's got to be at least one, right? Like, think of how long, like how long everything has been around, like religion and spirituality. Like, there's got to be some ancestors, or my witchy ancestors, my ancestors who approve of my path, those sorts of ancestors. Or it could just be one specific unknown ancestor, like I just said. Okay, so in order to do this, you write a letter, you know, just like a regular letter. And if you were doing this in a group, it's best if you write it beforehand, for a couple of reasons. One is that it can be a process, especially if you are writing a letter to somebody that passed away pretty recently. You know, you're going to be emotional, you're going to be upset, and while there's nothing wrong with, you know, doing that in circle, and I've done it in circle and outside of circle, so there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're a person who struggles with being emotional around other people, then you might want to do that beforehand. Plus, it can take one person, if you're doing it in a group ritual, one person 3 minutes and one person 15. So what does that person do? That's, you know, logistically, like, who wrote their 3-minute letter, then they're just going to sit there for 12 minutes, which is fine, as long as, you know, you're holding space and you're still in the ritual mindset, or you have something to do, singing a song, doing, you know, drumming, like, you can do things like that. But my suggestion is, especially if you're in a large group, have everybody bring their letter. And what we did is, what I've done in the past and many times, is we would go around and we would read aloud our letters. If you felt called to, I mean, obviously there's not going to be any pressure. There shouldn't be any pressure. If you're in a group and somebody's pressuring you to do something that you really feel uncomfortable about, run, right? So you can do that, and then after that, if you're just doing it by yourself in a solitary ritual, you know, set up your ritual however you like, write your letter by yourself. That's totally fine, right? And then afterwards, you can either burn it and allow the smoke to carry your words to the ancestors, or you can keep it in your journal or your book of shadows. So those are your two options. Okay, so I'm going to go back and go over the first couple ways. Number 1 was the ancestor shrine. Number 2, hosting a dumb supper. 3, offerings. 4, writing a letter to your ancestors. And number 5 is researching your family tree. When you research your family tree, it kind of sounds like you're just going to be like looking up names and dates, and sometimes it is like that. But you will also learn the stories of your ancestors. On census lists, it will usually, depending on, you know, the country, etc., many times it will list the occupation. So you will get, you know, if it says farmer or, you know, engineer or laborer, you know, you have that's an extra connection with that ancestor. That's something you know about them, other than when they were born and when they died. So you learn these stories, and you also learn stories through wills. You know, when someone passes away, there's a will, so you can learn stories, and they're likely not always to be good stories. I found out that my ancestors owned slaves. I was pretty shocked to learn that, and it's not a positive story, but it is a story, and that's you know, it's a negative part of my heritage. But I learned that story by researching wills, because this jackass's slaves were passed to his kids. So you'll learn stories like that. I also learned that one of my super posh British ancestors was born out of wedlock, and her father lived with the mother for years, but didn't get divorced from his wife in another country, and they had 7 kids together. So it's really interesting. Christy did the family tree on dad's side, Irish descent, went back to 1854. That is pretty impressive because Irish records are pretty rough. So anyway, so that's awesome. So yes, and also through books. There are surname books. You can look on eBay to see if there are books, and these books a lot of times include stories of how the ancestors lived. Also, when you are looking up laborer and like engineer, and you're looking at their careers, their occupations on census lists, you can research like what was it like to be a laborer in the 1800s in Kentucky, or etc. Right? So even if you don't know their specific story, you can kind of get an idea what it would be like to be them. Took forever. Found out my great grandfather died in prison. Thank goodness for the Mormons, right? Okay, so speaking of Mormons, let's talk about free resources. Familyhistory.org, I believe it's familyhistory.org. Family Search, shoot, I should have double checked that. Maybe Christy might know. The Mormons, the LDS Church, they're really into genealogy because part of their like church doctrine is that they can baptize people after they've died. So that's why they have a lot of records, and it's really important to them that they keep these records, right? I'm going to find out the right link, and I'm going to post it in the comments after I'm done with this video. But so you can go on their website, and there are tons of free resources that you can use to search out your family history. You can also keep your family tree on there. I keep my family tree on Ancestry. You don't have to pay in order to keep your family tree there. And there are some free listings on Ancestry.com as well. However, and you know, like in the commercials, they have a little green shaking leaf. And you're like, click here, and you can see all of these other people's research. That's a paid like subscription will allow you to do that. Also, be really aware that when you're using Ancestry, if you do a paid subscription, you click on the link and the little leaf, and the leaf is going to bring up a bunch of like possible like expansion of your family tree. That's somebody else's research. That doesn't mean that it's right. I could not find, I was searching for a document to link to of my ancestors, and turns out like everybody else had that relationship wrong. I found the marriage certificate and the death certificate for this relationship, and everybody else had incorrect research. So if you do your family tree, make sure you are using your own research, and don't just assume, don't make assumptions. I mean, you can if you want to, you know, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but yeah, it's easier to have a starting point, yes. So so make sure you are not making assumptions like, oh, you know, somebody else says that I'm related to this person, so that must be true. You know, make sure you do your own due diligence. Another free resource is at Ancestry, the LDS Church, which also you can actually visit many of the LDS churches, and they have people that will help you do your genealogy. Find a Grave. That sounds pretty morbid. Find a Grave. And Find a Grave is basically, you can type in your ancestor and like hopefully the year that they were born or die or whatever, and you can find out where they're buried. And many times it will have a picture of the tombstone, and they have people who actually go around and take pictures of tombstones at cemeteries and index them. And many times people will put their lineage, if not on the actual tombstone, in like the Find a Grave entry. But again, I always suggest to do research. You can also join groups like Facebook groups. There are tons of genealogy resources out there. Facebook groups, there are genealogy groups that are for specific areas like Kentucky and like Northern Ireland and that sort of thing. And there are also surname groups. Like if you typed in like genealogy Latchford for me, like there might be a group for that. Also, another good research is Reddit. There's a genealogy subreddit in there, and the people are very, very helpful. You can say, especially if you, many of the paid services, they'll give you just a little snippet of information, but not everything because they want you to pay for the service. And many times, if there's something you just have to have, one of those people in there will probably have a paid subscription, and they likely will help you. So I'm not saying don't pay for subscriptions because it's really helpful, and I do that when I get into like my genealogy thing again. I go kind of in fits and spurts. But so that is number 5, is doing your family tree. You're honoring your ancestors by finding them. You're incorporating it into your practice by spending your personal energy into finding out more about your ancestors, and that in itself is kind of an offering, right? So again, I'm just going to recap the 5 ways. We started with an ancestor shrine or altar. Second one was hosting a dumb supper. Third is offerings. Fourth, letter to your ancestors. And 5th is researching your family tree. So I hope that this helped. I hope that you enjoyed this. And the replay will be up at least for a little while. So if you know anybody in this group that has an interest in this but maybe didn't catch the live stream, if you know them, you can like tag them in the comments. Or if you know anybody outside of this group who would be a good fit for this group, you're welcome. That would be a good fit for this group, or has an interest in ancestor work, you can invite them to the group. Okay, women, ladies only, please. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and I will talk to you soon, and I will let you go. You guys have a great day, and if you do these, I would love to hear your stories. You know, I would love to hear what you do and how you do it. And I'm going to post a prompt in the group for that in just a few. Okay, so you guys have a good day or night wherever you are.